Chapter 369. Jun Wui, Dongfang Wenqing, Xikong and Yi, and the others had also come to bid their farewells. Venerable Mei nodded absent-mindedly. In her eyes, an ordinary Shen Xian and Tian Xian expert was only a san or a si, that's all. Venerable Mei didn't want to blow up this matter if it wasn't for the fact that Jun Wui, the three Dongfang brothers, and Jun Dashao were involved in this matter. And, the Venerable Mei didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She would have been embarrassed if that had happened. So, she wouldn't have even nodded in agreement. So, how could she pay attention to what they were talking about? Her heart was still unsettled. She waited for a long time, and then raised her head. Her eyes were filled with the starry river, and the bright moon in the sky. It's already nighttime. I didn't even realize that such a long time has passed. What was I thinking about that made me so absent-minded? This has never happened before. Why is this happening? She turned her head again, and noticed that there were only 3 people left by her side. All the Xian beasts had quietly retreated under the leadership of the Tiger King and the Lion King. However, she could faintly see dust rising from the depths of the forest. It was the dust that had been stirred up during their retreat. I've been too absent-minded. The retreat of such a large number of Xian beasts would have been accompanied by loud noises even if it had been quiet and orderly. But, I hadn't even noticed it. I've never been in such a state of absent-mindedness in the last 100 years. The Venerable Mei didn't pay much attention to the allied human forces. They had also retreated by now. Even the corpses on the ground had been taken away. The only exception was Li Ju Tian and his son. One had turned into white ash, and the other had turned into minced meat. The allied forces had simply buried them, and piled them up into a small mound. That small mound was illuminated by the setting sun. Only a piece of white wood that had been cut from a tree was conspicuous. There were some words scribbled on it, the tomb of Li Ju Tian and his son. There were no other words apart from that. A supreme being of a generation, how glorious was he in the past? How arrogant was his way of doing things? In the end, he actually ended up in such a miserable state. It wasn't until he saw the wooden plaque that Venerable Mei finally came to his senses. He looked at it for a moment, then smiled bitterly and murmured, "So, the second paragon is just like any other beggar who's been frozen or starved to death. He's a nobody." Sighing, he looked around. Only the 4 of them were left in the vast forest. After more than a month of fighting and killing, the gratitude and grudges had finally come to an end. The heroes of the world who had gathered here finally dispersed and went their separate ways. Everything returned to normal, but some people were missing. The faint smell of blood still lingered in the air, adding a sense of desolation to this large open space. You just fought with Lei Baoyu and Bu Kuangfeng. How do you feel? You've already fought against the 4 great supremes who are here today. How does their strength compare to that of the 8 great supremes? I want to know how you feel about our Tian Fa forest and the hermitage. Venerable Mei folded his hands behind his back, and looked into the distance as he asked in a leisurely manner. He had asked 3 questions in a row. It seemed like a very ordinary question, but the 3 Xian beast kings felt an enormous pressure. Those 2 men are very powerful, very powerful. Long Crane carefully recalled the situation of the battle. Then, he flattened his long mouth and said, "The strength of any one of them surpasses that of the 4 great supremes who are here today. In fact, they are much stronger than the strongest of the 4 great supremes, Li Ju Tian. The 2 of them have joined hands, and their swords have combined in harmony. So, their might has multiplied. The 3 of us can't defeat them. Even if we were to fight with our bodies, we'd still lose. Moreover, this is an assessment based on the strength they've shown so far. I agree with third brother's opinion. Moreover, the hermitage has revealed the tip of the iceberg in terms of Lei Baoyu and Bu Kuangfeng's strength. I'm afraid that their overall strength is slightly higher than our Tian Fa." Qian Sun Serpent Queen gently stroked her long hair. Her beautiful face had a dignified look on it. Slightly higher than us? That's too conservative. I don't dare to have such an extravagant hope. I think that they're not just higher than us. In fact, they're far higher than us. Venerable May slowly turned around, and spoke up in a bleak tone, "Your progress is too slow. I'm very disappointed." Long Crane and the other two Xian Beast Kings lowered their heads with red faces. One of the three holy lands is an extremely dangerous place. Tianfa Forest has declined too much in recent years. Perhaps it will be stripped of the title of an extremely dangerous place in the near future. That kind of humiliation. Hee, Big Bear, Long Crane. Venerable May sneered and said, "You two have already guaranteed the loss of the Tianfa's sacred fruit. So, you know what to do if there's no news of this matter after 3 years." Venerable May's tone had become extremely stern. Long Crane and Bear Mountain stood up straight. Their faces were solemn as they said, "Don't worry, big brother. We two brothers will take responsibility if something goes wrong." Venerable May snorted and said in a low voice, "Do you two think that your heads are worth a lot of money?" Everyone was left speechless. How could the heads of the two Xian Beast Kings be worthless? But, what would be the point of chopping off their heads if the situation were to change? In fact, they would only be wasting their strength for no reason. So, they didn't know what to say about these two. Venerable May raised his head, and pondered in silence. The Tianfa is unsought, and the Xian Beast Kings return to their roots. Tianfa's 10,000 years depends on one person's success or failure. What profound meaning is contained in these 4 sentences? The Tianfa's Xian Beast tide had already passed. But, the Tianfa's side was still shrouded in fog, except for the phrase, "The Tianfa is unsought." Venerable May had thought that the Xian Beast Kings would suffer great losses this time. And, he had thought that the Xian Beast Kings would return to their roots. But, it seemed that this wasn't the case. The Tianfa's 10,000 years depends on one person's success or failure. It was even more shrouded in fog. I can't understand it. What does it mean? Boss, that brat, since you want to take him as your disciple, why don't you? Snake King asked. I naturally have other ways. Venerable May looked into the distance and said slowly, "How can I let him escape from my palms so easily? If I don't teach him how to be a good person, wouldn't it be too easy for him?" The last few words were extremely cold and gloomy. In fact, it sounded like he was gnashing his teeth in hatred. The 3 Xian Beast Kings had known him for many years. So, how could they understand their boss's character? They couldn't help but shiver at the same time. They looked at each other in dismay. Does boss want to take a disciple or take revenge? Why does he have such a gloomy and vengeful tone? I'm already on the verge of breaking through. Today's battle has given me an epiphany. If I want to break through the final barrier in one fell swoop, blindly practicing is not the best strategy. I must travel the world. That's the best choice. Venerable May smiled and said, "Bear King and Crane King, the two of you guard the Tianfa forest well. Don't go out for a while. Qian Sun and I will go out and have a look in the next 2 years." She sighed after she finished speaking. Venerable May's limpid eyes were filled with confusion and contradiction if one could see through the black cloth that covered her face. Venerable May's eyes were as limpid as the autumn waters. Bear Mountain and Long Crane bowed in acknowledgement. Venerable May stood there quietly. The curtain of night slowly fell, and the biting cold mountain wind started to blow. Venerable May didn't use her Xian Qi to protect her body. She just stood there on the peak of the mountain. Her black robe fluttered behind her, and outlined her curvaceous and exquisite figure. Her figure was infinitely beautiful. One could only vaguely see her silhouette from the side. But, it was enough to make anyone feel a feeling of peerless elegance, because, this vague silhouette alone was enough to make all the women in the world who called themselves beauties feel ashamed of their inferiority. Even though she did not reveal her true appearance, just by standing in the wind, her peerless beauty and elegance had already caused the bright moon in the sky to lose its splendor. The entire sky had turned completely dark. On the peak of the mountain, a graceful and elegant figure was still standing there motionlessly, allowing her peerless elegance to sway in the night wind. A long time passed. Then, someone sighed softly, and a low voice drifted in the wind, what should I do to you? The sharp night wind whistled and carried away the lingering sound of those words. That outstanding and peerless figure seemed to flash for a moment, and then, the entire world was filled with darkness. It was as if the sky had already lost its last bit of brightness. Although the sky had already turned dark before this, as long as that figure was here, it would be the dazzling green lotus at the peak of the snowy peak. Now that she had left, she had finally taken away the last bit of scenery high up in the sky. The majority of the people who had returned to the southern heaven city had gradually dispersed. After all, the Allied forces had suffered a crushing defeat. The Shui Han Manor was the strongest force on the continent. Even the second great master Li Ju Tian had been defeated and killed. However, the Shui Han Manor's beasts had returned to the forest. So, they wouldn't cause any harm to the continent. Therefore, the Allied forces had achieved their primary objective. So, no one was idle. So, everyone had their own matters to attend to. However, Jun Wui and the others who had been in the limelight during this battle were frowning. Jun Moxie has disappeared. Da Xiao has mysteriously disappeared. This startling turn of events has made these people very anxious. Solitary Eagle, Dongfang Wenqing, and the others searched everywhere, but couldn't find a trace of him. Jun Wui had no choice but to postpone his return, and rest for a few days. What he didn't know was that during the few days he had been resting, the Jun family's reputation had soared to the peak in one fell swoop. Countless Xian Qi experts who were interested in attending the meeting had spread the news of the Jun family's power and influence in just a few short days. The Jun family could be considered as a prestigious family. But, their greatest prestige came from their military prestige. So, the Jun family couldn't be provoked lightly in the eyes of the ordinary families of the pugilistic world. But, that didn't mean that they couldn't be provoked. This was especially true for those families with Sky Xian experts, or even Spirit Xian experts. There weren't many forces that couldn't be provoked. Only the Silver Blizzard City, the Shui Han Manor, and a few others. Chapter 370. Inside the tent, Guan Qinghan supported her chin with her hand. She stared blankly at the flickering candlelight in front of her, and heaved a long sigh. Sister Guan, are you thinking of Brother Mo Xie? Dugu Xiaoyi quietly sat on one side. She hadn't seen this innocent and beautiful girl for a few days. She had obviously lost some weight. Moreover, there was an inexplicable worry on her face. She was inexplicably startled after saying this sentence. Do I want Sister Guan's answer to be yes or no? Moreover, she recalled that she had called Guan Qinghan Sister Guan, and Jun Moxie Brother Mo Xie. Wouldn't that make them a pair? She hastily corrected herself. Are you really thinking of Mo Xie? Guan Qinghan turned around and smiled warmly. Xiao Yi, why do you ask? What do you want my answer to be? Dugu Xiaoyi pouted and said, of course. Jun's third uncle wants you two to be a pair. If you don't think of him, who else would you think of? No one was optimistic about him in the beginning. I was the only one who chose him. Why is everyone trying to snatch him now? After saying this, she suddenly felt a heartfelt grievance in her heart. Her eyes turned red. Guan Qinghan's bright eyes flickered as she said, Sister Xiao Yi. Don't worry. But he has been gone for such a long time. It's really worrying. It's the kind of worry that a sister-in-law would have for a brother-in-law. It's really not for anything else. Dugu Xiaoyi pouted even more and said, but you're not his sister-in-law now. You're family. You're close to him. Of course, you don't need to think too much. Humph. This guy casually disappears. When he comes back, I'll make sure to. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes and thought of a brilliant idea. She immediately stopped talking and her face turned red. The more she thought about it, the more she couldn't sit still. After a moment of bashfulness, she hurriedly stood up and said, I'll go out first. I have something to do. As she spoke, she ran out as fast as she could. Guan Qinghan looked at her hurried back in confusion and finally couldn't help chuckling. After laughing, she immersed herself in her own thoughts and sighed again. She looked at the candlelight in confusion and murmured, "What should I do? What should I do? I am really sinful." While everyone was worried about Jun Moxie, Jun Dashao was also in a huge crisis. Jun Moxie had taken a risk and used the flame of primal chaos to deal with Li Ju Tian. His attack had been successful, and the results had been incredible. In fact, it had turned the second great master Li Ju Tian into ashes in one fell swoop. However, the backlash from the flame of primal chaos had left Jun Moxie to suffer a fate worse than death. Jun Moxie had killed Li Ju Tian at the time. Li Ju Tian didn't have the strength to fight back. However, Jun Moxie was well aware that his every move was being closely watched by the three strongest experts present: Venerable Mei, Lei Baoyu, and Buquang Feng. It wouldn't be difficult to kill Li Ju Tian at that time. But, the difficulty lay in the fact that he would have to kill Li Ju Tian under the watchful eyes of so many people. Moreover, such a method would expose his true identity at any time. As long as his methods were not in line with his identity as a super powerhouse, the three of them would not hesitate to make a move and expose his identity. And, the Jun family would face a true calamity if that happened. Moreover, there would be no way to save them. However, any effective method would have a high risk of being exposed. Therefore, Jun Moxie had decided to take the risk and use the flame of primal chaos. Jun Moxie had thrown caution to the wind in order to get rid of the Shuehun manor. Dashao had been prepared to bear the backlash of the flame of primal chaos. But, he hadn't expected that it would come so quickly. Moreover, it would be so intense. Even his incomparably tough nerves were almost unable to bear it. Jun Moxie had always boasted that his bones were hard. He believed that no punishment could make him say anything he didn't want to say. He was confident that he could withstand any kind of torture. In fact, he would die at worst. In his previous life, when he was training to resist torture, he had endured all the punishments. Under his unyielding character, any kind of punishment was nothing more than a life experience. Therefore, Jun Moxie didn't care about any kind of physical or mental pain. Therefore, he acted as he pleased. He would do whatever he wanted. He would laugh, curse, and play around with life. Or, he would frown and be aloof. He would do whatever he wanted. Because in this world, there is no longer anything that I fear, or dread. Therefore, he was able to talk and laugh with His Majesty the Emperor even though he was a debauchee. Moreover, he dared to curse a supreme expert even though he was a Jade Xian expert. What can you do to me? Even if you can do anything to me, so what? I've endured the most extreme pain in the world. Moreover, I'm not afraid of death. So, what else can I be afraid of? Just like acting tough, one also needed to have strength. Only with strength and good mental fortitude can you act tough. Without strength and good mental fortitude, acting tough is just a joke. A prince could show off to his heart's content in front of the county or the common people. A billionaire could also show off to his heart's content in front of the middle class and the poor. They had no scruples at all. Why? Because no one can threaten them. So, they aren't afraid. Even if they want to brag, they don't need to worry about it. But, can a beggar act tough in front of Supermanly? That's simply unimaginable. Jun Mo Xia naturally had the capital to back up his pretentious act. I'm not afraid of anything. I don't care about anything. So, why can't I? I have the Hongjun Pagoda. Even if all the experts in the world attack me together, they won't be able to kill me. I have such a strong backing. So, why can't I act tough? I've only cultivated for 3 months. That's comparable to other people's 10 years of hard work. I have such a strong backing. So, why can't I act tough? If I say that I'm the second genius in the world, then who dares to say that they're the first? Therefore, Jun Moxie had always been arrogant. He had always looked down on everyone. He even felt that there was nothing in the world that could threaten him. There was nothing that he needed to be afraid of. He didn't need to have any scruples. But now, he knew that he was wrong. In fact, he was ridiculously wrong. Because, there was some pain that even the soul couldn't bear. Not to mention a living person. Jun Mo believed that he would be able to laugh calmly at the pain of his physical body, even if his hands and feet were broken, or his bones were scraped to cure poison. However, the pain of his soul was something that could even torture a great principal golden immortal to the point of collapse. For example, right now. It was the backlash of the flame of primal chaos. He was wrapped up in the thick aura of the Hongjun Pagoda. He was holding his head and rolling on the ground in agony. He had never imagined that the backlash of the flame of primal chaos would be so overbearing. There were some things that one shouldn't try, even if one had a reason to take the risk. Jun Moxie hadn't felt the slightest bit of discomfort when the flame of primal chaos had first launched its attack. In fact, he had even felt a kind of faintly discernible feeling of floating in the air. However, Jun Moxie had felt his world turn upside down the moment he had killed Li Ju Tian and absorbed the flame of primal chaos back into his body. This included the world of his soul, and the world of his consciousness. This kind of extreme pain was so intense that even the Hongjun Pagoda's heaven and earth aura, which could heal any kind of pain, was completely useless against it. That was because the flame of primal chaos was the origin of the world's fire. And it was burning the core of his soul at this moment. Jun Moxie clenched his teeth in agony. His facial muscles had contorted. He felt as if his soul was being pulled out of his body inch by inch. Then, it burned away bit by bit. It seemed as if there was a small flame burning in his heart. It was burning his fragile heart. It was slowly roasting and roasting. But, it was still keeping him alive. He was clearly experiencing the cruelest and most unbearable torture. It felt as if there was a fire in his brain that had been extinguished a long time ago. But, it had suddenly reignited. Moreover, it had started to burn faster and faster. In fact, it had started to boil in his brain. But, he was still conscious. His nerves of pain had been magnified 1,000,000 times. The black robe on his body had been rolled into a ball, and stuffed into his mouth. He had chewed it to a pulp. He wanted to faint, but he didn't dare to do so. That was because he would lose consciousness if he fainted. Then, he would suffer the backlash of the flame of primal chaos. And, he would end up like Li Ju Tian. That would be akin to shooting oneself in the foot. Therefore, the only thing he could do at this moment was to hold on. He was stubbornly holding on to the last bit of clarity in his mind. Jun Moxie would cease to exist in this world once that bit of clarity disappeared. Moreover, he would cease to exist in any world. Compared to the burning of the flame of primal chaos, the tiger stool, chilly water, 20 poisonous bamboo sticks stuck in the fingers, these kinds of punishments were simply like a drizzle. In fact, it could be said that he had been bitten by a mosquito. And, the backlash this time would have been equivalent to having one of his legs smashed. The disparity between the two was enormous. Sweat flowed out of his body like a small river. Then, it evaporated, and turned into a cloud of mist. Ah! Jun Moxie faced upwards and let out a long and loud scream. He stood up, and then fell back down. His entire body was stiff like a zombie. Then, his body twisted and contorted on the ground. In fact, it had already violated the limits of the human body. This kind of pain continued for an entire day and night. The dark flame of primal chaos danced cheerfully under the furnace of good fortune. It seemed as if it was cheering for June Moxie's suffering. Only the art of unlocking the heavens' fortune persistently operated. It flowed through June Moxie's meridians again and again. The thick aura of the Hong Jun Pagoda poured into his meridians like a whale. It washed away the impurities in his meridians again and again. The amount of aura that had entered his body this time was far greater than any of the previous times. In fact, it was comparable to the total amount of aura that had entered his body in the past. The rich milky white aura in the air seemed to be being sucked in by a powerful whirlpool. It issued a continuous whooshing sound as it continuously rushed into June Moxie's body. It seemed as if there was no end to it. This time, after going through the continuous cleansing of such a huge amount of spiritual qi, his body had completely changed. For example, if one were to say that June Moxie's body was a garbage bag of meat before his transmigration, then after his transmigration, his body would be a genius body after the transformation of the Hong Jun Pagoda. Although it was outstanding, it was still within the recognition of many experts. It was within the range that humans could understand and accept. However, June Moxie's body could no longer be described with the word body. To put it more exaggeratedly, Da Xiao's body was basically equivalent to Tang Sanzang, who went to the Western paradise to obtain Buddhist scriptures. The reason why it was said to be basic wasn't to say that eldest young master was inferior to monk Sanzang, but that eldest young master was stronger than monk Sanzang. To put it bluntly, Monk Sanzang's flesh was an ordinary person's body that contained an unimaginable amount of spiritual energy. But eldest young master's body, in addition to containing a frightening amount of spiritual energy, was far superior to ordinary people. Whether it was his temperament or his soul, his muscles and bones were strengthened, his meridians were all unobstructed, and his body was filled with abundant spiritual qi. Even his internal organs had been completely transformed because of this opportunity, becoming brand new. The young master's original cultivation speed was already abnormal enough, but after this time, he believed that his cultivation speed would be several times faster. Moreover, the path was smooth, and there was no possibility of him going berserk. Because there was no chance of him going berserk. Every meridian in his body had been completely opened because of this change. Moreover, they had all been expanded to the maximum limit that a human body could reach. June Moxie's subsequent cultivation was just a process of accumulation, nothing more. For example, if the capacity of an ordinary person's meridians and dantian was a well, then June Moxie's capacity was a large lake. It was just that there was very little water in this large lake. But once this empty lake was filled up, it would become a vast expanse of mist, and the water would connect the sky and the earth, boundless. Of course, this would be a very long process of accumulation. After 1 day and 1 night, June Moxie finally slowly recovered. Slowly opening his eyes, June Moxie's heart still had some lingering fear. That terrifying feeling of 18 levels of hell opening up on him at the same time really made this arrogant and fearless evil monarch feel a chill in his heart. It was really too painful. He tried to move his fingers, but he found that he was completely powerless. Every muscle in his body seemed to have turned into cotton. Apart from the strength to breathe, he didn't have any other strength to use. It was like a person who clearly felt that his entire body's functions were normal, but inexplicably became paralyzed. Exerting himself to take a deep breath, June Moxie's mind moved, and the art of unlocking heaven's fortunes slowly began to move. After 1 circulation, he suddenly opened his eyes wide in shock. This was completely unimaginable. Before this, the art of unlocking heaven's fortune would need at least a few breaths of time to complete 1 circulation. But now, in almost an instant, the art of unlocking heaven's fortune had already circulated through all the meridians in his body and returned to his dantian. This was simply an astonishing speed of lightning. Such a godly speed had one biggest advantage: he never had to worry about lacking xian qi, and never had to worry about losing strength. In other words, if he was in a battle, as long as June Moxie was willing, he could fight endlessly. Until, forever. As long as he did not starve to death or get beheaded by a super expert. What did this mean? This meant that Jun Moxie was originally a genius, but now he had completely turned into an inexplicable monster. Jun Moxie was ecstatic. Now, even if he did not have any common sense, he knew that this time, he had truly been reborn. Forcefully suppressing the excitement in his heart, Jun Moxie began to revolve the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. After all, his body's functions were not under his control, and getting rid of this state was the most important thing. If he was still in this paralyzed state, then even if he had an outstanding body, what use would it be? Fortunately, as the Xian Qi revolved, the strength controlling his body also recovered bit by bit. Every time the Xian Qi revolved, he would feel thoroughly refreshed. Now, training had become a form of enjoyment, not a form of agony or suffering. As his strength returned bit by bit, Jun Moxie's heart was jumping with joy. This time, he had circulated the Xian Qi for a total of 72 circulations. As the last circulation of the Xian Qi stopped, Jun Moxie could clearly feel that his entire body was filled with explosive power. As long as he willed it, he could absolutely destroy anything. Jun Moxie straightened his back, and slowly sat up from the ground. Then, he flipped over and stood up. With a single thought, he immediately cut the Xian Qi into the Xian Qi circulation channel, and waved his hand without cheating. A pale blue light violently shot out, and was turned into nothingness by the Hongjun Pagoda's spiritual qi. Fuck. Jun Moxie sat on the ground. This time, he was 100% shocked. Oh my god. How could it be pale blue? I'm going crazy, am I dreaming? Before I was ravaged by the flame of primal chaos, I was only at the peak of the Yu Xian level. How did I reach the Tian Xian level in such a short period of time? Even if I'm riding a rocket, it can't be this fast, right? This huge surprise was a complete accident. After being stunned for a long time, Jun Moxie finally remembered. Still doubtful, he waved his palm again, as if he was dreaming. That's right, it was pale blue, and its power was enormous. Tian Xian level, this is definitely right. But, how is this possible? Don't tell me that using the flame of primal chaos can have such a good effect. Jun Dashao couldn't help but feel complacent. He had completely forgotten that his soul had almost flown away and dissipated a moment ago. One must know that the flame of primal chaos was the best flame to use in alchemy, but it was also the source of all flames in the world. It was also the most destructive flame in the world. The flame of primal chaos existed in the Hongjun Pagoda, and the Hongjun Pagoda existed in Jun Moxie's consciousness. If he wanted to use the flame of primal chaos, he had to bring it out from the Hongjun Pagoda, and let it exist directly in his sea of consciousness. Everyone knew that the so-called consciousness existed in the brain, and not in the buttocks. To extract such an extremely dangerous thing from the brain, and then turn it into a physical object through the meridians to injure someone, this was definitely more dangerous than a person who didn't know any martial arts, and walked on a tightrope on a precipice. Although Jun Moxie knew that this was a risky move, he didn't understand the true power of it, and recklessly did this stupid thing that he absolutely shouldn't have done. Furthermore, because of the miraculous effects of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, he was actually able to successfully draw it out of his body. Furthermore, with the help of the Hongjun Pagoda and the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, it protected Jun Moxie's weak meridians, and prevented him from dying on the spot. All these conditions couldn't be omitted. It has to be said that although our protagonist's ignorance of cultivation has reached such a terrifying level, his luck is equally good to the point of being invincible. It was like a person who was about to die of poverty, wandering around in a desolate place without any toilet paper, and casually grabbing a stone. It turned out to be the only gold nugget within a 3,000-kilometer radius. Right now, young Master Jun was equivalent to this person's luck. Jun Moxie was astonished, but he was already a Tian Xian level beginner. This was an indisputable fact. A 17-year-old Tian Xian level beginner. A Tian Xian level beginner who had only cultivated for 4 months. 4 months ago, he was a mere third-level Xian Qi rookie, and 4 months later, he had become a genuine Tian Xian level expert. This kind of terrifying progress was like riding a rocket, and it even had the ability to jump through space. Chapter 372. Waha, this is really cool. Jun Moxie took a few deep breaths and crazily somersaulted a few times with the pure energy of his body. He roared to his heart's content and vented the excitement in his heart. Only then did he stabilize his excited state of mind and enter the path of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. In times of great joy and great sorrow, he must vent. If he forcibly held it in and forced himself to stabilize his state of mind, it was very likely that he would overreach himself and extreme joy would turn into sorrow. Jun Moxie understood this very well. So although he was very anxious to know what kind of situation he was in, he didn't rush to use the art of unlocking heaven's fortune to check. Instead, he did that crazy action just now to vent the excitement in his heart. After venting, whether it was physically or mentally, there would be a subtle psychological hint that, I've already vented it. During practice, this aspect of inner demons would be greatly reduced. If he could get rid of this inner demon at such a time, what else could he do? Therefore, Jun Moxie's cultivation process was very smooth. Almost as soon as he raised his spiritual qi, the circulation speed of the cultivation technique reached its limit. Then, he opened his inner vision and carefully examined his own situation. Once again, Jun Moxie's jaw dropped. Fuck. A series of vulgarities burst out like a machine gun. Apart from this word, Jun Moxie had no idea what else to say. He didn't know what to say either. His mind was a mess, and the only thing left was this extremely vulgar word. This is, fuck. Jun Moxie shouted wildly. He suddenly extended his hand, and slapped his chest a few times. It seemed as if he was showing off his strength like a black bear. It could be seen that the young Master Jun was ecstatic. And, in any case, it was inside the Hongjun Pagoda. No one could see it, and no one would know. At this moment, Jun Dashao's entire body was clean and smooth. There was not a single thread of clothing on his body. Dashao's clothes had long been torn to shreds because of the pain and torture he had suffered earlier. Jun Dashao was thoroughly shocked. Because, he suddenly discovered that in his meridians, there was a substance that looked like mercury flowing clearly. In fact, the substance itself had a kind of sparkling feeling. Although it looked thin, it contained an inexhaustible amount of energy. At the first level, the qi was formless and intangible. When he reached the second level of the art of creation, it had already turned into a fog that was the same color as the spiritual qi in the Hongjun Pagoda. But now, the flow of spiritual qi had disappeared, and a substance had appeared in his meridians. Without a doubt, this was the transformation of spiritual qi. Only when the amount of spiritual qi had reached a certain level would such a qualitative change occur. This was the Xian technique that he had transformed into a substance. This thin silver line indicated that Jun Moxie had already taken one step into the threshold of the third level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Finally, he was about to break through again. Jun Moxie once again calmed his mind. He focused all of his attention, and once again threw himself into the circulation of the Xian technique. Over and over again, the speed became faster and faster. That thin silver line within his meridian seemed to be emitting a rapid shio sound, as if it was violently trembling and emitting an unwilling hum. 1 step, 2 steps, finally, on the peak of the second level, he had taken another step forward. Jun Moxie felt that there was a thin layer of paper in front of him. He only needed to use a little bit of force, and he would be able to pierce through it. At that time, it would be a whole new realm. Jun Moxie slowly exhaled, and slowly inhaled. He maintained a calm state of mind. With a slow but increasingly rapid speed, he gradually attacked the bottleneck over and over again. He didn't think of gathering all of his strength to forcefully break through in one go, because success was the right way. And now, it was obvious that the time had come for success. Being too hasty would not be ideal. Therefore, Jun Moxie wasn't in a hurry. Moreover, he didn't dare to take any more risks. Who knew if there would be any adverse side effects if he forcefully broke through in one go? Or, the danger of some violent impact, just like this time's Flame of Primal Chaos incident. It had to be said that after experiencing the backlash of the Flame of Primal Chaos, Jun Moxie had truly become much more cautious. Finally, Jun Moxie clearly felt that this thin layer had already been slowly pushed back by the impact of his spiritual energy. Then, it slowly became thin, and slowly became transparent. Finally, it sounded like an extremely weak sigh. The barrier of the third layer finally opened up a tiny hole. It was like a balloon that had been pricked by a needle, but it still burst in the end. Jun Moxie still didn't advance rashly. He continued to steadily push his spiritual energy, and slowly injected it bit by bit. Slowly, more and more spiritual energy entered, and finally, bang! Jun Moxie only felt a loud sound in his mind. It was as if the world had turned upside down. For a moment, he felt as if the entire Hongjun Pagoda was spinning. The furnace of good fortune in front of him was sometimes on his left, sometimes on his right, and sometimes on top of his head. The flame of primal chaos was also moving along with it. Jun Moxie was completely unmoved. He once again steadied his mind, and resolutely stepped forward. Finally, a huge force suddenly rushed over. This force was so huge that it had far exceeded Jun Moxie's imagination. Jun Moxie only felt the meridians in his body suddenly bulge, and then shrink. Without any warning, an illusory stone door suddenly appeared in front of him. The illusory stone door swayed a few times, and slowly stabilized, becoming a real door. Jun Moxie stood in front of this door. He felt the spiritual energy in his body emit a cheerful sound like a tsunami. It was as if it had its own spiritual nature. Jun Moxie suddenly felt moved from the bottom of his heart. He had finally reached the third level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. He had finally opened the third level of the exquisite Hongjun Pagoda. Jun Moxie recalled the pain he had just experienced. It was more painful than the 18 levels of purgatory at the same time. Jun Moxie involuntarily smiled. One can only become a superior person after experiencing the bitterness of suffering. This sentence was not false. Of course, it was just like Jun Moxie's perseverance. This kind of pain wasn't something that everyone could endure. In fact, the vast majority of people couldn't bear it. And if they couldn't bear it, their souls would scatter, and they would never be able to reincarnate. Fortunately, Jun Moxie had successfully endured it. Since ancient times, the number of people in both worlds who had been able to survive this ordeal could be counted on 5 fingers. It was enough to be proud. The evil monarch's perseverance were the source of his wild and evil confidence. They were also his true capital. In a trance, a pithy formula suddenly appeared in Jun Moxie's mind: there is a path in the clear sky, but time is not lost. Raise your eyes, and there are jade trees. The heart is full of spiritual mountains, and the mind is full of celestial lakes. The soul moves 9 times, and the Tao of alchemy can be entered, the third level of the Hongjun Pagoda, qi roaming between heaven and earth. He had finally broken through. From the first level of illumination to the second level of guarding heaven and earth, his Xian cultivation had crossed 9 levels in one go. And this time, he had broken through from the peak of Yu Xian to the beginner of Tian Xian. This was a direct leap of 4 levels. The progress was even more shocking and terrifying. Although it was only 4 ranks, the improvement this time was much greater. As everyone knew, the higher the cultivation of Xian Qi, the more time it would take, and the levels were clear. There were 4 major difficulties. The first was breaking through 9 levels, which was the dividing point between ordinary people and Xian cultivators. The second was Yu Xian, which was related to the starting point of a person's lifetime achievement. After Yu Xian's realm, even if it was just a small level, if the person's aptitude was slightly insufficient, he or she might not be able to make any progress in his or her life. The younger one was to reach Yu Xian's realm. In addition to showing that he or she had outstanding aptitude, it also meant that he or she might have a higher desire for achievement in the future. Therefore, although Bailey Luo Yun was only at Yu Xian's realm, he had attracted the attention of countless experts. And the third obstacle was to advance from the peak of Earth Xian to Tian Xian, which was a huge divergence in the strength of a Xian cultivator. The difference between the strength before and after the breakthrough could not be calculated with reason. In addition to talent and countless efforts, it also took a lot of time. For an ordinary Tian Xian cultivator's progress, it was almost equivalent to the total amount of time it took to advance from the first level of Xian Qi to the peak of Earth Xian. As for the fourth and final obstacle, it was the Shin Xian realm. Generally, if a Tian Xian cultivator could live for more than 30 years, he or she would definitely be able to advance to the Shin Xian's realm. However, when an ordinary Tian Xian cultivator reached the Tian Xian's realm, most of them had already reached old age. Another 30 years to advance to the Shin Xian's realm was often insufficient. As for the realm above the Shin Xian's realm, it was not a level that a cultivator could reach. Only geniuses with great luck could touch it, but they could not enter these four obstacles. In summary, the eldest young master had suffered extremely great hardships this time, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he had narrowly escaped death. However, the rewards he obtained were extremely generous as well. The advancement this time was absolutely an extraordinary leap. Not only was such a rate of advancement unprecedented, it was believed that no one would be able to surpass him in the future. Jun Moxie silently recited the newly obtained pithy formula, and couldn't help but think of the pithy formula of the previous two levels. He still remembered that when he was at the first level, there were two sentences in the pithy formula: 9 refinements of the soul, do not fall into the yellow springs. When he was advancing to the second level, there was a sentence: 9 transformations of the soul, the Dan heart is stable. And when he reached the third level, as expected, there was another sentence: 9 movements of the soul, the Dan Dao can be entered. In these 3 levels of pithy formula, other than the word soul, there was also the number 9. Jun Moxie silently nodded, thinking in his heart, there should be a deeper meaning behind this, right? 9 was the extreme number. The Hongjun Pagoda had a total of 9 levels, and the art of creation was also divided into 9 levels. Now, in the pithy formula of each level, there was the number 9. Although he had not advanced to the higher levels, but Jun Moxie could imagine that the pithy formula of the higher levels would also have the word 9. Could it be that this was actually hinting at something? Chapter 373. Jun Moxie pondered for a while, but couldn't find an answer. So, he decided to stop thinking about it. Instead, he felt the surging and vigorous aura in his body. It was unprecedentedly active. This made Jun Moxie very excited. I'm no longer a weak little shrimp from this moment on. The initial stage of the Sky Profound Realm. Although it wasn't very powerful in this continent where experts were as common as trees in a forest, it was still an unattainable level for an ordinary Xian practitioner. Not to mention that he had many methods that transcended the boundaries of his cultivation. I have the strength to do things openly. I have long wanted to do things, but I don't have the strength to do them. I don't need to rely on my mysterious identity and the Hongjun Pagoda to intimidate people. After all, my fist is the only thing that matters. I still like the feeling of being pretentious. But, that isn't my true strength. If there was a day when his true strength could reach that level, what would the situation be like? Jun Moxie's eyes revealed a trace of longing. The mysterious art of unlocking the heaven's fortune has always brought me many surprises. This time, I've reached the heaven realm. What will happen next time? I still remember the few times I watched television in my previous life. I saw those martial arts experts flying in the sky and burrowing into the ground. They could flatten a small mountain with a single palm, and kill hundreds of people with a single slash of their swords. But, I felt that it was pure nonsense. How can there be such abnormal martial arts in this world? I, the king of assassins, can't do it. So, who can? But, look at Venerable Mei, Li Ju Tian, Lei Baoyu, Bu Kuang Feng, and even the beast kings of Tian Fa. I can flatten a small mountain with a single palm. I can even flatten a large mountain. This is the real world that I've personally experienced. It's not fictitious. So, what's impossible? Jun Moxie smiled self-deprecatingly. Sure enough, there are limits to one's thinking in any world. Jun Mo Xia put away his messy thoughts, and stepped into the room. He stepped into the third level of the Hengjun Pagoda. There should be a magical gift for him here, right? The first level was the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, the second level was the flame of primal chaos, the furnace of good fortune, the yin-yang escape art. Then, what about the third level? What kind of surprise was waiting for him? As soon as he entered the door, Jun Moxie immediately felt a sense of awe, an awe that came from the bottom of his heart. It was a unique coldness that could only be felt when facing a peerless treasured saber. It was as if his body was about to be chopped into two by a divine weapon. A wisp of gold floated in the air. The moment Jun Moxie walked through the door, it was like a ghost that had been drifting for thousands of years had suddenly found a host. With a whoosh, it flew over like a bolt of lightning and burrowed into Jun Moxie's forehead without any hesitation. At the same time, another wisp of cyan light floated over silently and drilled into Jun Moxie's glabella. Jun Moxie suddenly felt his whole body overflowing with vitality, followed by a burst of cold killing intent, quickly fusing with the huge killing intent in his body. At the same time, two messages suddenly appeared in his mind. The first message was, turning ordinary iron into wondrous gold, cutting everything into nothingness, the power of gold of the 5 elements. The second message was, with a flick of the fingers, the sky and the earth are covered in an instant, the power of wood of the 5 elements. Power of gold. Power of wood. What was this? Jun Mo Xia's head was filled with confusion. How do these two things work? But they were not as simple and clear as the yin-yang escape technique. This was really strange. As he was thinking in a daze, all the spiritual energy in the 4th level of the pagoda rushed into Jun Moxie's body at the same time. In an instant, it was full. Jun Moxie slightly revolved it, but found that this power was completely different from the energy flow in his body. It seemed a little special. Could it be that this was some kind of special ability like the yin-yang escape technique? Jun Moxie tried to revolve it, and suddenly understood. This was because when he circulated this aura, his mental strength became unprecedentedly active. Moreover, it was many times stronger than before. It felt as if it was as mighty as the Yangtze River. With a thought, his spiritual energy violently surged out, and Jun Moxie instantly understood. This was a spiritual attack. The power of spiritual energy. Closing his eyes, he quietly digested the harvest this time. Jun Moxie opened his eyes, and they flashed. From now on, I will raise my eyebrows to fight the world, and wave my hand to control the winds and clouds. I truly have the capital to fight head-on. Inside Tiannan City. Dugu Xiaoyi unconsciously paced back and forth in her tent. Her pretty face was sometimes bright and sometimes gloomy. Suddenly, she clenched her teeth and said to herself, "Humph. This lady has been eyeing him for a long time. No one will fight for him. I was the first one to discover Mo Xia Gij. How can I retreat like this? Humph, even if it's a favorable position, so what? This lady naturally has a way." Suddenly, she clenched her teeth, and made up her mind. Then, she shouted, "Someone come. Call the Dugu family's guards. This lady has an important matter to tell them." After a short while, the guards hurriedly rushed over. They all had an anxious look on their faces. The little princess had never issued any orders before. But, she had taken the initiative to summon them this time. Moreover, she seemed to be in a hurry. Could it be that something big has happened? The people of the Dugu family didn't care what they were doing. Dugu Xiaoyi ordered with a murderous look, "Drag these 12 fellows out and give each of them 100 strokes." Everyone was dumbfounded. "We didn't bring any aphrodisiac with us. We were just honest men at home. How could we have committed a crime? Not only are we good men, but we are also soldiers. Soldiers on the battlefield, is it wrong not to think about that thing? What kind of logic was that? Heaven, earth, give us a place to reason things out, please." Following Dugu Xiaoyi's order, a few ferocious guards immediately came in. These people were Jun Moxie's personal team. They were selected from the 250 people to take care of Dugu Xiaoyi. Every one of them was skilled in martial arts. They didn't care whether the little lass's order was reasonable or not. They just followed her orders and dragged these people out to carry out the military law. "Wait!" The leader of the guards broke out in cold sweat. If the 100 strokes were to really hit them, the dozen or so of them would probably be wiped out here. At this point, it was better to comply with the little princess's wishes. After that, they would go and report to Miss Guan Qinghan and ask her to take good care of the little princess. Presumably, nothing would happen to her. If they really lost their lives because of this matter, it would be too unjust. "Oh? Do you have it now?" Dugu Xiaoyi waved her hand to dismiss the guards and asked excitedly. "Skinny monkey, you should have it on you, right? I remember that you had some stashed away when we first left Tianxiang. So, take it out." The leader of the guards stared at the thinnest man in the group and said in an indisputable manner. I. The man called Skinny Monkey blinked his eyes pitifully. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't expected that his boss would sell him out under the threat of 100 strokes. "You what?" "Quickly take it out," the leader of the guards rebuked. He then bitterly scolded, "You good-for-nothing guy. But I took it for myself. I thought that this trip to the southern Heaven City wasn't a real military operation. So, I was planning to relax on the way back." Skinny Monkey looked at his boss with a pitiful expression. His skinny face had turned red. In fact, he was so embarrassed that he couldn't show his face. Someone couldn't help but giggle. Explaining is covering up, and covering up means that it's true. What kind of man would carry aphrodisiac with him? Everyone knew the answer to this question without asking. "Is it for men to eat?" Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes lit up. "That's good." That's barely acceptable, quickly hand it over." "I'm anxious to study it." Skinny Monkey was depressed and ashamed. He trembled as he fished out a small paper package from his bosom. He held it in his hand, and wanted to hand it over. But, he had some misgivings. He had clearly seen the strange look in his companions' eyes as they looked at him. So, he wished that he could dig a hole, jump in, and bury himself in it. "This is embarrassing. I don't know how much money I'll have to spend to shut these guys' mouths. It's not a big deal if only these guys know that I'm his brothers. But, I'll have to take a knife to my own throat if these people spread the word that I'm not good." Dugu Xiaoyi became impatient when she saw that guy's shyness. She suddenly jumped over and snatched the package. She laughed happily. Then, she remembered that she had to keep a straight face. She asked seriously, "This thing, how do I use it?" Skinny Monkey's face and neck turned red. He struggled and said, "You just need to pick up a fingernail, dissolve it in wine, and drink it." Pfft. A few people behind him couldn't help but burst out laughing. Then, they hurriedly covered their mouths with their hands and coughed. Their bodies spasmed, and the muscles on their faces twisted. "Oh." Dugu Xiaoyi nodded in understanding. She had the appearance of an expert. She asked, what's the reaction after using it? Will it harm the body? This won't. As for the reaction, this reaction. Sweat as big as soybeans fell from Skinny Monkey's face. He really didn't know how to answer. His face had almost turned sallow. Everyone behind him moved in the same manner. They covered their mouths with one hand, and covered their stomachs with the other. Then, their bodies started to tremble. Oh. I know. I know. There's nothing else for you to do. You can all go. Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red. She seemed to have realized that her question was inappropriate. So, she waved her hand. Everyone felt as if they had been pardoned from a crime. They hastily turned around and walked out. But, they heard Dugu Xiaoyi shout, wait. This matter is a secret. Do you understand? This matter concerns the happiness of millions of women. So, it must not be leaked. Dugu Xiaoyi spoke in a dignified manner, especially my brothers. They can't know about it. Do you understand? Well, I'm afraid that they'll steal it. Yes, I'm afraid that they'll steal it. What can we do about it? What? Afraid that they'll steal it? Do the Dugu family's Dashao need to steal it? Everyone's complexion became extremely strange. Dugu Xiaoyi's brothers would have vomited blood and fainted if they had heard these words. We're very normal, Dugu Xiaoyi glared at them, so, they can't know about it. If someone told them, I'll pour the entire packet into someone's stomach. Do you understand? Yes, we understand. Everyone hastily retreated. They hadn't gone far when they suddenly threw themselves on the ground. They then started to roll on the ground while laughing. In fact, they were laughing so hard that they couldn't stop. You. Skinny Monkey was angry and ashamed. His eyes were wide open. His cheeks didn't have much flesh to begin with. But, he was also trembling. Ha ha ha. I'm dying of laughter. Skinny Monkey is such a resourceful person. It's really unexpected. No wonder this guy always runs far away whenever we go to a brothel. Ha ha ha, these young masters also steal it. I'm so proud. Several people held their bellies, and started to roll on the ground. They were laughing so hard that they started to roll on the ground. Skinny Monkey's face turned purple as he trembled. He suddenly hugged a tree, and ferociously hit his head against it a few times. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. The leader of the family guards coughed a few times after laughing enough. He then said, I've laughed enough. So, I must tell everyone that no one is allowed to divulge today's matter. I believe that everyone knows the consequences of this matter once it gets out. And, none of you will have a good time when that time comes. Today, no one has received 100 strokes of the stick. So, I'm sure that no one wants to be punished by military law in the future. Do you understand? Everyone nodded, and indicated that they would keep this a secret. I must go and see Miss Guan. I must ask her to take good care of the little princess. But, we mustn't cause a disaster. The leader of the family guards hurriedly left, in the tent. Dugu Xiaoyi carefully wrapped the small paper bag with her handkerchief. She then put it in her bosom, and guiltily looked left and right. Then, she exposed a complacent smile. Humph humph humph. Dugu Xiaoyi was very happy. She wanted to sing. She smiled, and revealed a pair of small canine teeth. Then, she bounced over to the mirror, and carefully examined her face. She then muttered to herself, I'll see where you can run to. Humph humph, June Moxie, I'm going to force myself on you. I'm going to cook the raw rice into the cooked rice, and you're going to run away. Humph, Sister Guan, don't blame this little sister for being disloyal. Hee hee, let's see how you're going to snatch it now. Dugu Xiaoyi beamed with joy as she thought of this. Then, she made a funny face. Chapter 375. Because Dugu Xiaoyi had once heard someone say, if a man and a woman made rice out of raw rice, then they would never be separated again, at least the man would have to be responsible for the woman. Of course, how did raw rice become cooked rice? Dugu Xiaoyi really didn't know. As for the effects of the aphrodisiac, Dugu Xiaoyi was even more clueless. The only thing she knew was that this aphrodisiac was a necessary tool to make rice out of raw rice, and that was why such a big show had been created today. Brother Emosia is mine, mine alone, humph humph. Dugu Xiaoyi opened her luggage and rummaged through her clothes, and then, one by one, she gestured at her body, as if considering which clothes to wear would be the most effective in making this pot of raw rice of June Moxie into a fragrant cooked rice. At this time, the young Master June, who was currently in the Hongjun Pagoda, would never have imagined that he had already been treated as a pot of rice by a certain little demoness. Furthermore, she was currently rubbing her palms together, preparing to cook him. If he had known, perhaps there would be no need for Dugu Xiaoyi to cook him, he would have cooperatively been cooked, and there would be no need for such a strenuous effort, and it would definitely be a soft landing. Dugu Xiaoyi was humming a little tune as she searched for clothes, when the curtain behind her suddenly lifted, and an elegant fragrance assaulted her, but it was Guan Qinghan. It turned out that the leader of the family guards had gone to look for Guan Qinghan, but of course, he didn't dare to say that it was about the aphrodisiac, and only stammered, saying that there had been some abnormalities in the past few days, and that her mood wasn't quite right, and that he and the other family guards were worried that something had happened, and said that it was some old illness, and so on. The more he hemmed and hawed, the more worried Guan Qinghan became. She really thought that Dugu Xiaoyi had some strange old illness. Finally, after hearing what he had to say, she hurried over. Little sister Xiaoyi, what happened to you? Do you feel uncomfortable there? Guan Qinghan asked worriedly as soon as she entered the room. The sudden question made Dugu Xiaoyi, who was immersed in a sweet dream, jump in fright. She screamed and turned around. Panicking, she asked, Elder Sister Guan, why are you here? Do you also want that medicine? Medicine? Me? I'm not sick, why would I want that thing? Guan Qinghan was sure that Dugu Xiaoyi was really sick. Otherwise, why would she take medicine? And he's even urging me to eat too. Oh. Dugu Xiaoyi heaved a sigh of relief. She patted her chest in shock and said with lingering fear, I thought you were here to compete with me for cooking. So it's not like that. Thank goodness you're not. Cooking? What kind of cooking? Guan Qinghan cried out in surprise. The worried look on her face deepened. She reached out her hand to touch Xiao Yi's forehead. Little sister Xiao Yi, what happened to you? Why are you speaking so incoherently today? Yes, just now she asked me if I wanted medicine, and now she's saying that I'm competing with her for cooking. This is a military camp. Why do we need to cook? Besides, does Dugu Xiaoyi know how to cook? What's with all this nonsense? I'm fine. He, I'm really fine. Nothing happened to me. Ha, 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 Dugu Xiaoyi laughed dryly. She looked a little flustered. She touched the small cloth bag in front of her chest with a guilty conscience. She felt a little calmer in her heart. She raised her head and secretly looked at Guan Qinghan. Then, she stammered, by the way, elder sister Guan, is he back? Not yet. A worried look appeared on Guan Qinghan's face. She comforted her, don't worry. It's okay. He's so powerful and has so many tricks up his sleeves. What could happen to him? I think he'll be back in a while. Dugu Xiaoyi chuckled and said with relief, that's right. This guy is very capable. He'll definitely be fine. I'm still waiting for him to come back. I need something from him. You're waiting for him to come back? Why are you looking for him? Guan Qinghan thought. Could it be that Xiao Yi is overly worried about Emosia and has lost her mind? The more she thought about it, the more likely it seemed. She couldn't help but become even more worried. I'm waiting for him to come back to cook. Ha! Ah! Dugu Xiaoyi had almost let the cat out of the bag. So, she hastily said, I'll go out and take a look. Why hasn't Little White returned yet? I haven't seen that little cutie for several days. I really miss him. She lowered her head with a red face, and kneaded the corner of her clothes. Then, she hurriedly walked out. She blamed herself as she walked. Dugu Xiaoyi, why can't you keep your cool? What if the plan is leaked, and elder sister Guan finds out about it? She'll strike first to gain the upper hand. What should I do then? Guan Qinghan secretly made up her mind. It seems that Xiao Yi has a real problem. Otherwise, she wouldn't look like this. She's talking incoherently, and her actions are even more abnormal. I must keep a close eye on her. So, she also followed her out. It was already noon of the third day by the time Da Xiao came out of the Hongjun Pagoda. He had been pondering non-stop on his way back to Tiannan City. These new powers of metal and wood are very magical. But, it's a pity that I don't know how to make use of them. That, turning ordinary iron into wondrous gold, cutting all things into nothingness. Does it mean that I can turn ordinary iron into a divine weapon as long as I use this magical power? This is the only way to cut all things into nothingness. However, Jun Moxie secretly cursed himself as he thought of this. Damn! How can there be such a good thing in this world? Isn't this the same as turning stone into gold? No, it's even more abnormal than turning stone into gold. It's a legendary immortal technique, poor Jun Daxiao. He still doesn't know that all the techniques he's practicing are actually immortal techniques. Moreover, they're the highest level and ultimate techniques. For such a person to be able to cultivate smoothly all the way until now, it was truly an anomaly that had never been seen since ancient times. Moreover, the speed of his cultivation was so fast. This was a strange matter that no one could understand no matter how hard they racked their brains. Jun Moxie calculated the time. He realized that he hadn't shown up for 2 days. The third uncle must be getting anxious. Maybe the third uncle is better off. After all, the third uncle knows his methods. But, the 3 uncles must be very anxious. So, he didn't dare to delay. He went straight back. He had just entered Tiannan City when he bumped into Dongfang Wenjian. He was scolded by this uncle. Then, he was escorted into Jun Wui's tent. The news of Jun Moxie's return naturally reached the ears of Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiaoyi. Guan Qinghan finally let out a sigh of relief. Her heart was filled with joy. Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly blushed. Her heart was beating fast. She didn't recover after a long time. Who knows what that little girl is thinking? After dealing with Jun Wuyi's barrage of reprimands, the young master Jun's skin was thicker than the walls of the city. So, he laughed and ran away like a wisp of smoke, and ran back to his tent. Sitting on the chair, Jun Moxie thought about his new ability. He finally took an ordinary steel knife that was hanging in the tent. He held it in his hand. He wanted to test out his new magical power. Jun Mo Xia took a deep breath as he looked at the blade. He then closed his eyes, and activated the power of gold in his body. It passed through his meridians, and moved to his palms. Then, it passed through his fingers, and slowly reached the blade in his hand. The cold light of the blade flickered in his hand. In the blink of an eye, something strange happened. A faint golden light flickered. It was as if the blade of the steel knife was reflecting a sky full of stars. It emitted a dreamy brilliance. Suddenly, the light brightened. Then, it disappeared without a trace. A faint green smoke appeared. Jun Moxie opened his eyes. He looked at his hand. He was stunned. Oh my God! The big knife that was half the length of a man in his hand had disappeared. And now, what existed in his hand was only a small knife the size of a toothpick. Perhaps, it couldn't be called a knife anymore. It should be called a needle. It was just a slightly bigger needle. But, it was 10 times heavier than a normal needle. Moreover, this needle was in the shape of a knife. It was the same as what Jun Moxie had imagined. When Jun Moxie had activated this power, he had imagined the shape of a knife. It was this small knife in front of him, the only difference was that it had shrunk by a few thousand times. That was all. Jun Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After all, Jun Moxie had come to realize that the phrase, transforming ordinary iron into wondrous gold, really existed after he had experimented with it. Moreover, this cultivation technique truly possessed such a heaven-defying ability. However, it wasn't that the whole piece of iron could be turned into magical gold. Instead, the ordinary iron had to be compressed to the highest degree. Then, the most essential part of the iron would be preserved and extracted. Then, it would form the shape that he wanted. Then, what about the rest of the iron? Where did it go? Did it evaporate into thin air? Jun Moxie was puzzled. He went out and brought in another knife. He activated the divine power again and concentrated on observing the transformation process. Only then did he see it clearly. It turned out that he had guessed correctly. It had really evaporated. After the faint gold flashed for a while, there was a burst of dazzling light. Then, it disappeared. Along with this burst of light, a faint smoke rose from the knife. It emitted a strange smell that made one want to vomit. As the smoke rose, the big knife in his hand disappeared. It turned into a pocket-sized knife that was as small as a toothpick. Jun Moxie smiled bitterly. If he wanted to forge a saber with the same length and thickness as the 2 sabers he had melted, he would probably need a small mountain's worth of fine iron to do so. Moreover, this toothpick-sized thing actually weighed close to 2 taels. If he used this material to make a knife like that, wouldn't it weigh a few hundred kilograms? The divine weapon was indeed a true divine weapon, but who could wield it? Jun Moxie loosened his hand. The 2 small, toothpick-sized knives slipped through his fingers. He heard 2 chi-chi sounds, and an unbelievable thing appeared in front of him. The willow table in front of Jun Moxie had actually been pierced with 2 small holes. The 2 toothpick knives pierced through the table like a hot knife through butter, but did not stop. With 2 so sounds, the knives directly drilled into the ground. In fact, the handles of the knives could not be seen. Chapter 376. Today's explosion. 3rd update has arrived. 4th update is in progress. Oh my god. Jun Moxie's eyes were perfectly round. He hastily reached out his hand, and picked up the 2 small, toothpick knives from the ground. He discovered that the hilt of the knives had penetrated at least 2 feet into the ground. Moreover, they were still continuing to fall. This is too awesome. Jun Moxie sized up the 2 toothpick knives. He couldn't bear to part with them. Jun Moxie knew that the knives had fallen when he had loosened his grip a moment ago. So, he hadn't used even the slightest bit of strength when he had held them. The 2 toothpick knives had pierced through the 5-centimeter thick willow wood table like a hot knife through butter. Moreover, they had effortlessly pierced through the air, as if they had pierced through the air. What kind of concept was this? What kind of level of sharpness had these 2 knives reached? This was the ultimate godly weapon that everyone yearned for even in their dreams. Wouldn't it be tantamount to elevating their Xian cultivation to an exaggerated level if I were to use this method to forge such a sword for my grandfather, 3rd uncle, and the others? In fact, it would be even more abnormal. A good weapon can increase a person's strength by a considerable amount. An average person wouldn't be able to wield such a weight. But, a weight of 300 or 400 pounds wouldn't require much effort for his grandfather, who was at the peak of Tianxian, and his uncle, who was at the middle level of Tianxian. Even if they weren't used to it at first, they would be able to familiarize themselves with it after 10 or so days of practice. I believe that even a great master or a Xian beast king with tough skin wouldn't be able to resist such sharpness. Lei Wu Bei's treasured knife would have been a godly weapon if he had made it that day. Then, the outcome of the battle against the Snake King would have been different. In fact, the battle against the Venerable Mei would have been even more unpredictable. I'll use this thing as a secret weapon, Jun Moxie laughed in an unusually lascivious manner. His eyes shone. He had already thought of countless ways to deal with his enemies with this thing. Good stuff, really good stuff. At least, from now on, his flying daggers were truly invincible. What kind of expert in the world could resist a divine weapon of this level? The answer was, absolutely no one. Some might be able to dodge it, but no one would be able to withstand it. Kill God if you meet God, kill Buddha if you meet Buddha. Jun Mo Xia chuckled mischievously a few times. Only now did he feel weak all over his body. He was about to return to the paralyzed state he was in when he used the flame of primal chaos. He hurriedly took in a breath of spiritual energy and slowly began to recover. Sigh, there's no such thing as a handout in this world. So, it didn't emit any sound even though she had shaken it with all her strength. Seeing that Dugu Xiaoyi was about to leave, Jun Moxie reached out to stop her. What a joke. I was just curious about this girl, and you want to leave without explaining? Do you think you can leave? Jun Mo Xia wanted Dugu Xiao to get rid of all the tricks he had up his sleeves. They're too hateful. Ah. Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red, and she was unable to restrain her anger. I just wanted to cook a meal, but they didn't give me the real thing. They're too much of a bully. Seeing that I don't understand this, they casually gave me something to fool me. Do I look so gullible to you? Dugu Xiaoyi rubbed her palms together, and her long, shapely eyebrows rose, and her murderous aura surged. But, the little girl instinctively felt that something was wrong as she spoke. Dugu Xiaoyi raised her head, and paused. She looked at Jun Moxie, and blinked her eyes. Suddenly, she said, Brother Mo Xia, what's wrong? Why is your face so red all of a sudden? Jun Mo Xia also felt that there was something wrong with his body when Dugu Xiaoyi asked this question. His whole body was showing signs of heating up. Moreover, there seemed to be a raging inferno burning in his dantian. His eyes slowly turned red, and he felt as if a volcano had erupted in his heart. Suddenly, a primal impulse burst forth. What's going on? Jun Moxie was astute. Having lived 2 lives, he knew what this fire was. So, he gritted his teeth and lowered his head. He used his remaining consciousness to think about it. Then, he cursed Dugu Xiaoyi 100 times in his heart. Girl, oh girl. You can play with anything, but you're playing with me. My innocence of 2 lives will be ruined by your hands. Thinking of his innocence, he looked at Dugu Xiaoyi in front of him. The more he looked, the more his blood boiled, and he couldn't control himself. Jun Moxie struggled with the pain in his heart. His complexion became more and more ferocious. You. What's wrong with you? Don't scare me, you. I. The little girl started to be afraid, and she retreated in panic. Dugu Xiaoyi looked at Jun Moxie's ferocious face. Her female intuition inexplicably sensed a great crisis. Now, the little girl didn't have the courage to cook anymore. Not to mention watching Jun Moxie being cooked, Dugu Xiaoyi had a strange thought in her heart. The drug is real. Look, he's being cooked. I want to go home. Jun Moxie's breathing became heavier. He tried his best to resist this innate male instinct. But, he felt that he couldn't resist it anymore. The green-dressed Dugu Xiaoyi in front of him, and the faint fragrance of a girl, constituted a fatal temptation to him. An irresistible temptation. He didn't want to endure it anymore. It was too hard for him to endure. That wine gourd, was it you who put the drug in it? June Moxie approached her step by step. The air coming out of his nostrils was hot, as if it was on fire. Yes. I just want to cook you, I don't mean anything else. Dugu Xiaoyi looked at him pitifully. As June Moxie approached, she retreated step by step. She was at a loss of what to do, and her eyes darted around in panic. She was almost scared to tears by his ferocious look. You want to cook me? What do you mean? Even though June Moxie's mind was in a state of chaos, he was still stunned for a moment. After thinking for a moment, he understood that it was cooked rice. He couldn't help but laugh angrily. He couldn't help but have no more misgivings. Gritting his teeth, he teased, if you want us to cook rice, do you still need to drug it? I'll be cooked with just a wave of your hand. Why bother? But you're not cooked yet. Don't come over. Dugu Xiaoyi trembled and curled up. She had already retreated to the corner of the tent. There was no place for her to retreat. At this moment, Dugu Xiaoyi felt extremely wronged. Why? Why? He obviously drank the drug, but why does he still treat me like this? And he had become so frightening. I'm so scared. I'm so scared. He looks so fierce now. Dugu Xiaoyi felt her whole body stiffen. When her eyes met with June Moxie's, she felt as if she was being electrocuted. The fear in her heart grew stronger. No matter how hard Dugu Xiaoyi tried to endure, she had finally reached her limit. She cried loudly, I'm wrong. Please let me go. I don't want to play anymore. I really don't want to play anymore. Now, the little girl was truly regretful. But if she had known that this would happen today, she wouldn't have done it in the first place. You started it, but it's not up to you to decide how and when to stop. In such a short period of time, June Moxie had already endured quite unbearably. He had already reached the point where he had no choice but to release the arrow on the bowstring. However, the current situation was something that Dugu Xiaoyi had never expected. Moreover, it was completely out of her expectations. Sob, why didn't anyone tell me about this before? Seeing that a real fight was about to break out in the tent. Suddenly, June Moxie. What are you doing? A clear and melodious shout rang out. At this critical moment, Guan Qinghan, who had been keeping an eye on Dugu Xiaoyi's movements, appeared in the tent like a divine soldier. Ah! June Moxie. You're despicable. Shameless. Why haven't you let go of Xiaoyi yet? Guan Qinghan screamed in fear, and turned around with a flushed face. Chapter 378. The two people in the tent were almost completely honest with each other. From the looks of it, it was obvious that June Moxie was using force. And Dugu Xiaoyi refused to comply, which resulted in such an awkward scene. Guan Qinghan was originally with Dugu Xiaoyi, but Dugu Xiaoyi sneakily took out a jade flute and asked Guan Qinghan to appraise it. Guan Qinghan's greatest interest in this life was the art of playing the flute, so she naturally complied and took it. Before she had time to appraise it, Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly held her stomach and said that she needed to go to the toilet, and then rushed out of the tent impatiently. Guan Qinghan didn't suspect anything. Moreover, she saw that Dugu Xiaoyi's face had turned red. It seemed as if she couldn't hold it in any longer. Guan Qinghan snorted, and let her go. She held the jade flute, and carefully looked at it. Then, she tested the tone, and waited for Dugu Xiaoyi to return. But after waiting for the first and second time, there was no sign of her, and after waiting for the third and fourth time, Guan Qinghan could not help but worry, and finally came out to look for her. She asked the soldiers along the way if they had seen Miss Dugu. The soldier pointed. Guan Qinghan asked along the way, and then found out that Dugu Xiaoyi flew into Jun Moxie's tent. She could not help but feel funny, angry, and an indescribable feeling. She had clearly suggested that the two of them should accompany each other to see this guy, but she did not expect Dugu Xiaoyi to use this method to leave her alone and run over first. Since she was with Jun Moxie, there should be nothing wrong. So when Guan Qinghan arrived at the tent, she hesitated for a moment, and wanted to go back directly, but then she heard something strange inside, and Dugu Xiaoyi actually shouted for help. How could this be? Guan Qinghan recalled Jun Moxie's image a few months ago, and her heart suddenly beat fast. Could it be? Dugu Xiaoyi's cries became more and more shrill, and she even started to cry. Guan Qinghan finally made up her mind and barged in. Who knew that after barging in, he would actually see such an awkward scene? Guan Qinghan suddenly felt that something in her heart was broken. She was completely disheartened. Tears flowed from her eyes. Jun Moxie, you disappoint me. No matter how Guan Qinghan felt, Jun Moxie had lost his mind. He couldn't hear what she said at all. Even if he could, he wouldn't understand and wouldn't care. Big sister Guan, please save me, boo-hoo. Dugu Xiaoyi cried and begged. She looked like a pear blossom in the rain, feeling wronged and pitiful. Guan Qinghan was furious. You bastard! Let go of me. She rushed forward and wanted to push Jun Moxie to the side. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't push him away. Dugu Xiaoyi, who was under Jun Moxie, finally bent her leg and kicked hard. Guan Qinghan cooperated and used all her strength to push Jun Moxie's body to the side, revealing half of Dugu Xiaoyi's body. It was sparkling and white, covered with little plum blossoms. It was the kiss marks that appeared on Dugu Xiaoyi's delicate skin under Jun Moxie's ravaging. Jun Moxie was still in a daze and didn't know how to use his own strength. Otherwise, even if there were 10 more Guan Qinghan, it would still be useless. Dugu Xiaoyi was ashamed and scared. She took this opportunity to get up and threw herself into Guan Qinghan's arms, crying loudly. What's going on? Guan Qinghan quickly grabbed Jun Moxie's cloak and covered her delicate body. Before Dugu Xiaoyi could say anything, Jun Moxie pounced on her again like a hungry wolf. Dugu Xiaoyi screamed. In a panic, she wrapped the cloak tightly around her and scrambled to escape. The little girl was really scared today. Jun Moxie was like an arrow on a bowstring, but he suddenly lost his target. How could he bear it? He didn't know that the girl in front of him had changed into another person. He pounced on her and hugged her. Guan Qinghan was so angry that her delicate body trembled. She shouted, Jun Moxie. You're crazy. You still want to. Before she could finish her words, she suddenly saw that Jun Moxie's face was flushed red. His eyes were bloodshot and his gaze was bewildered. He didn't have his usual clarity. It was obvious that he had lost his rationality. She couldn't help but be shocked. What was going on? Although Guan Qinghan was a virgin, she was older and knew more than Dugu Xiaoyi. Although she didn't notice it when she first came in, she could see the abnormality now. She also guessed what was going on with Jun Moxie. An aphrodisiac. And it looked like an extremely violent aphrodisiac. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this. Guan Qinghan wanted to pull out her sword to scare Jun Moxie. But her hesitation was too late. Jun Moxie pounced on her like a wolf and hugged her. Then, he opened his mouth and kissed her. Guan Qinghan was confused, embarrassed, and anxious. She pushed with all her might. But how could her strength be compared to Jun Moxie? Moreover, when Guan Qinghan saw that Jun Moxie was obviously tricked, she couldn't bear it and didn't know what to do. With Jun Moxie's current state, if she went out and he couldn't vent, how could he bear the violent effects of the aphrodisiac? His brain would definitely be fried, and his life might even be in danger. Guan Qinghan's face was usually cold and frosty. She had never been kind to Jun Moxie. But he was her brother-in-law after all. And he was the only descendant of the Jun family. Moreover, Jun Moxie had been wronged because of her. He had dared to become the enemy of the whole world in a fit of anger. And that image was still deeply engraved in her mind. Her heart, which had been lonely for more than 20 years, had also throbbed because of that. He was such an outstanding young man who was so affectionate to me. How could I just watch him be tortured like this? And there would be serious consequences. Jun Moxie had dared to oppose the Shui Han manor for his own sake. In fact, the Shui Han manor was like the sun in the sky at that time. He hadn't flinched at all. So, how could she repay his deep friendship? The Jun family didn't care about my own family. In fact, they even wanted to send me away. But they were prepared to sacrifice themselves in order to protect me. How could she just watch the only descendant of the Jun family get tortured by an aphrodisiac? In fact, Jun Wuyi's adoptive father had been harassed by the Shui Han manor in every possible way for the sake of his own matters. He had even been framed by them, and had almost died in the process. And he would have died in battle if someone hadn't helped him in secret. And all of this had been for her sake. Now that Jun Moxie has been poisoned, can I really walk away? Jun Moxie has had a good impression of me ever since I've arrived at the Jun family. In fact, he had even used his debauchee identity to express his feelings to me. So, why? Only recently did she find out that his previous appearance was a complete disguise. Then, why did he look like that? Why did he confess to me at that time? Now that I think about it, it's very rare. Was he really going to be completely indifferent to such a feeling? It's easy to find a priceless treasure, but it's hard to find a lover. What are the so-called geniuses of the so-called aristocratic families compared to Jun Moxie? I'm a free man now. But Guan Qinghan's heart was in turmoil for a moment. In fact, it seemed as if she had gone crazy. It had to be said that Jun Moxie's devotion was a one-sided misunderstanding of Guan Qinghan's own wishful thinking. There was no other reason than that this Moxie wasn't the same Moxie. Their bodies were the same. But their souls had been completely replaced by someone else's. The things that the previous Moxie had done before couldn't be attributed to the current Jun Moxie. But it seemed that even his body was different now. It was undeniable that the current Jun Moxie had a good impression of Guan Qinghan. But his feelings for this cold-blooded assassin were far from passionate. In fact, they were far from discussing marriage. It could even be said that with Jun Moxie's current temperament, even though he was unrestrained, unscrupulous, he would never take the initiative to confess his feelings. If it wasn't for the fact that a woman took the initiative to pursue him, or that the old man forced him to arrange a marriage, he might even grow old alone. Because the current mindset of Jun Moxie was still the mindset of the king of assassins in his previous life. Starting a family was an unbelievably extravagant thing for an assassin. Just as Guan Qinghan was hesitating, suddenly, she was shocked. She looked at Jun Moxie's eyes, which were burning with passion. Suddenly, her heart was filled with tenderness. Forget it, let me use this life to repay the Jun family's great kindness to me. Guan Qinghan quietly closed her eyes. Two streams of tears slowly flowed down her jade-like cheeks. She had already given up resisting. The little girl was panic-stricken. She quickly fled to her own tent. She changed her clothes, and rested for a while. Then, she calmed down. However, she still felt that her face and body were feverish. It's too scary. It's too scary. Oh my God. Dugu Xiaoyi patted her chest. She still had some lingering fear. She recalled Jun Moxie's ferocious appearance. It seemed as if he wanted to eat her alive. In fact, it seemed as if he wanted to swallow her whole. It's all thanks to elder sister Guan, ah. Elder Sister Guan. Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly stood up. Her beautiful eyes widened to the limit. I escaped. But, how could I forget about Elder Sister Guan? Elder Brother Mo Xia has already eaten the cooked rice medicine. If he were to hurt Elder Sister Guan, won't Elder Sister Guan suffer a lot? Wouldn't that be my sin? The more Dugu Xiaoyi thought about it, the more uneasy she became. She rushed out of her tent like a whirlwind. She disregarded everything else and used her lightness kung fu. Then, she madly rushed towards Jun Wui's tent. Jun Wui, Solitary Eagle, and the three Dongfang brothers were discussing the matter of withdrawing the troops. Then, they saw the tent's door open. Dugu Xiaoyi was gasping for breath as she rushed in. Third Uncle Jun, cough cough cough. Elder Brother Mo Xia is in trouble. He's in his tent. Elder, please go and take a look. If you're late, Elder Sister Guan will be in trouble. 8 chapters in 2 days. I did it. This month's leaflets will be issued in the form of N times of the month. I don't know how many times I'll be able to do it. I wonder if I'll be able to surpass the 15 leaflets in September, or even more. I've never issued a leaflet to ask for votes. This is my habit. It's also my insistence. However, as long as I break out, I'll issue a leaflet to ask for votes. This is also my affirmation of my own labor. Some brothers don't understand the timing of my publishing. They say that if you publish so many manuscripts at once, it will affect the effect of asking for votes. I'm helpless. I've never been a writer who writes quickly. Every time I break out, it means an all-nighter of overtime. I don't have a fast speed. I can only use time to accumulate it bit by bit. Last night, I wrote from 10 at night until 5 in the morning. After writing 10,000 words, I went to sleep with satisfaction. This afternoon, I woke up and went through the words I wrote last night. I revised every single sentence. Wrong sentences, typos, and even punctuation marks. I revised them all several times. Only when I fully approve of it will I upload it. This is not only my responsibility to everyone, but also my responsibility to myself. No one would want to read a book filled with typos and wrong sentences, right? Hee, I'm very confident that this book is definitely not the one with the fewest typos in Qidian. However, it's definitely at the top. I'm very proud of this. After I've finished editing, I began to upload the broken chapters. I won't say that it's been hard on you. I just hope that everyone can understand. Now that the second leaflet of the month is over, I'm reaching out to my brothers and sisters to ask for a few monthly votes. Everyone, please work together and lift up our evil monarch. Thank you, asking for monthly votes. Chapter 379. The little girl had been running all the way here. She was so anxious that she had forgotten to regulate her breathing. She was gasping for breath. She barely managed to finish her sentence. She couldn't express the urgency of the matter properly. Then, she opened her mouth and stuck out her tongue. She was panting heavily. Her 2 small hands were placed on her knees. She was so tired that she was sweating profusely. What happened? Jun Wui turned pale with fright. He stood up immediately. The other 4 also looked at Dugu Xiaoyi with an inquiring look in their eyes. Hurry. Go. Dugu Xiaoyi choked and coughed. She waved her hand anxiously. She looked weak. Go. As soon as the word left her mouth, the 5 people disappeared. Dugu Xiaoyi panted for a while. Then, she walked towards them with her hands and feet trembling. The little girl was also very worried. She didn't know how they were doing. Did something happen to them? How hateful. That guy clearly said that he would be fine after eating this thing. But, why does Brother Mo Xia look so uncomfortable? He doesn't seem to be rational at all. If something really happened to him. Oh my god, Jun Wui and the other 4 people were experts of the present age. So, they covered the distance in the blink of an eye. Among them, Solitary Eagle's lightness skill was the best. He was far ahead of them. When Jun Wui and the other 3 people arrived outside Jun Moxie's tent, they saw Solitary Eagle standing there with a strange expression on his face. He didn't move. He didn't say anything about going in or leaving. What was the meaning of this? Seeing that the 4 people were about to rush in, Solitary Eagle quickly moved to stop them. Don't go in. Why? The 4 people asked at the same time. But, Solitary Eagle didn't need to answer. The 4 people immediately understood the reason. The commotion inside the tent was not small. The 4 of them were all experienced people, so how could they not hear the reason behind it? Immediately, all of them had black lines on their faces. Jun Wui looked up at the huge sun in the sky and sighed with a red face. This nephew of his was really too preposterous. With this thought in mind, Jun Moxie shouted, "Everyone, listen to my orders. Everyone, come out immediately. Bring them to the training ground in the center of the city for training. If anyone doesn't show up within the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, he will be punished according to military law and will not be tolerated." As soon as the order was given, the bugle sounded and everyone rushed to the drill ground. He didn't dare to delay the slightest bit. Solitary Eagle narrowed his eyes as he followed Jun Wui and the others to a distant tree. He then sat down and sighed. Third General Jun is really considerate. You even cleared the place for your nephew in this kind of matter. That Jun brat's extravagance is really not ordinary. Dongfang Wenqing and the other 2 burst out laughing. Everyone thought that Jun Moxie was committing lewd acts in broad daylight. It was indeed preposterous. But, they didn't think of anything else. Jun Wui's face turned red as he looked at Jun Moxie's tent from afar. He then frowned. Such a big commotion must have been heard inside. So, why isn't there any reaction? Military orders must be obeyed. He shouldn't have. I would have also pretended not to hear it if I were in his place. Oh, by the way, isn't Moxie still a virgin? Dongfang Wendao shrunk his neck in a vulgar manner as he laughed mischievously. You might be able to, but Moxie shouldn't be able to do such a thing. He always acts with propriety. I've always felt that there's something strange here. But, I can't tell what it is. Jun Wui frowned as he pondered deeply. Dugu Xiaoyi finally arrived at this time. Young Lady Dugu was flabbergasted to see the 5 people standing at a distance with strange expressions on their faces. But, she turned her eyes to see that Guan Qinghan was nowhere to be seen. So, she immediately became angry. Where's elder sister Qinghan? Dugu Xiaoyi was both nervous and angry. Didn't you rescue her? Elder brother Moxia's situation isn't normal. Something bad might have happened. Dugu Xiaoyi was like an ant on a hot pan. She mumbled as she paced back and forth. Xiao Yi, you're saying that the woman inside is Qinghan. Jun Wui's complexion changed. This was no small matter. This matter would have become big if the woman inside was Guan Qinghan. He looked at the tent from afar, and roared in anger. He then hatefully said, "That bastard. He's doing such a shameless and despicable thing. I won't forgive him." The bastard that Jun Wui was referring to wasn't Guan Qinghan. Instead, it was Jun Dashao who was violently. But, it was all too late now. How would Guan Qinghan survive if he were to rush in at this time? That wouldn't be saving Guan Qinghan. Instead, it would be forcing her to commit suicide. So, he could only prepare for the aftermath. He could only hope that Guan Qinghan wouldn't commit suicide. Jun Wui had a big headache for a moment. He had thought that Jun Moxie wouldn't have caused any trouble even if he was acting preposterously. After all, who hadn't been frivolous in their youth? But, he now understood the seriousness of the matter. How could Guan Qinghan have sex with June Moxie in broad daylight with her cold and reserved personality? Moreover, the two of them weren't that close. In fact, Guan Qinghan wouldn't do such a thing in broad daylight even if they were husband and wife. But, this matter had clearly happened in front of his eyes. But, how could he explain it? There could only be one explanation. Guan Qinghan had been forced to do it. From this point of view, all the mistakes were naturally placed on June Moxie. So, Jun Wui was seething with anger at this moment. This was a huge scandal. The fact that Guan Qinghan was a free woman hadn't been announced to the world yet. So, if this matter were to spread out, then it would be obvious that this brother-in-law and sister-in-law were having an illicit affair. What should I do? Wouldn't the Jun family's good reputation be destroyed in a day? June Moxie, that little bastard. I must beat him to death. Jun Wui's face had turned purple. He couldn't restrain his anger. So licentious, so shameless, so corrupt of the family's reputation. He really deserves to die. I must beat him to death. At this moment, Jun Wui was like a beast trapped in a cage. He was pacing back and forth with a sinister and vexed expression on his face. If this matter were to spread out, breaking both of June Moxie's legs would be the lightest punishment. Even if both of his legs were broken, this matter wouldn't be over. The most taboo thing in the world was to abstain from lewdness. And now, not only had June Moxie violated it, but the target was his sister-in-law. Jun Wui could imagine how furious his father would be. Brother Wui, since things have already reached this point, it's too late to say anything. If it really doesn't work, we can let Mo Xia go to our Dongfang family to lie low for a while. Once old master's anger has cooled down, we can discuss this further. Dongfang Wenqing stroked his beard and made his suggestion. He was prepared to clean up his nephew's mess. He also understood old Master Jun's temper. The current situation was not optimistic. However, no matter what, the person involved was still his nephew. How could Dongfang Wenqing watch his nephew suffer? His little sister was already pitiful enough, that's right. Which man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? What's so great about fooling around with women? It's just a small matter. Is there a need to be so hostile? Dongfang Wenqing's words were already siding with his nephew. Do you think it's worth it? You want to kill him? You really don't know how to react. Let's not talk about others. Even my eldest brother had more than 20 wives and concubines. Which one of them was legitimate? Not all of them were snatched. Before Dongfang Third Master could finish his kind words of persuasion, Dongfang Third Master's murderous gaze had already locked onto him. You bastard! What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Dongfang Wenqing's originally scholarly face immediately contorted in anger upon hearing his third brother's words. He looked at this guy who had no filter, as if he wanted to eat him alive. His fists were clenched so tightly that they made cracking sounds. Dongfang Wenqing shrunk his head and took 2 steps back. He hid behind Dongfang Wenjian and fearlessly whispered, "What do you want to say? Tell me the truth." He understood Jun Wui's feelings very well, because he himself was feeling the same way. Solitary Eagle pondered for a moment, and then comforted them, "Everyone calm down, and don't panic. Don't forget that Mo Xia has inherited his master's legacy. He's a master of both martial arts and medicine, and his attainments are extraordinary. I believe that with his master's extraordinary skills, Mo Xia will be fine." Jun Wui sighed, and his emotions slowly stabilized. His eyes were filled with worry as he said, "I hope so." The 3 Dongfang Wenqing brothers suddenly became curious, and asked, "Mo Xia's master? Who is that?" Since when did Emosia have a master? The three of them were most curious about the words Emosia's master. They seemed to have some sort of magical power. Even Junwoo, who had sunk into a half-crazed state, suddenly sobered up. Why? You've seen his master. He's a real expert. Solitary Eagle's face was filled with admiration. The three of them could see that this respect came from the bottom of his heart. It wasn't an act. We've seen him. Who is he? How can we not have an impression of such an expert? The three Dongfang Wenqing brothers were shocked. It must be known that Solitary Eagle was one of the 8 great masters. Moreover, he was the most arrogant of them all. So, Dongfang Wenqing couldn't think of anyone in this world who was worthy of his admiration. Mo Xie's master is the mysterious black-robed man who got rid of Li Ju Tian that day. Solitary Eagle said in an amazed tone. The 4 of them were left speechless. Even Junwoo had only found out that the mysterious and powerful black-robed man from that day was Jun Moxie's master. No wonder that senior was so protective of the Jun family. Junwoo had finally uncovered the biggest doubt in his heart. So, he's Mo Xie's master. Dugu Xiaoyi scratched her head as she saw everyone's reaction. So, she asked in a puzzled manner, what's wrong with everyone? Is the medicine not good? It's good. Junwoo looked at her powerlessly. The little girl's face was full of confusion and naivety. She was waiting for Junwoo to point out the right path for her. That medicine's not good. The key thing is. I say, little girl, you've cooked the wrong rice. Dongfang Wendao grinned and said, you're the one who wants to cook the uncooked rice. You've already placed the rice in the pot, added water, and lit the stove. But, when the rice is done, you left on your own. You cooked the rice, but it was eaten by someone else. So, you've worked hard for nothing. You've harmed yourself to help others. Dongfang Wendao sighed deeply, you've worked hard for someone else. But, you've made wedding clothes for someone else. God makes fools of people. Ever since they found out that Jun Mo Xie's master was a mysterious expert, everyone felt more at ease. Dongfang Wendao was also in the mood to make fun of Dugu Xiaoyi. Chapter 381. As an assassin in his previous life, Jun Moxie had never really been moved, let alone involved in love. If he wanted to satisfy his physiological needs, he would only occasionally use real money to buy a smile. Because he really couldn't afford love. Even the king of assassins couldn't afford it. If he loved someone, he would have more fetters in his heart. If he had a family, then his opponents and enemies would have more targets to deal with him. Jun Moxie didn't know how many assassins had suffered because of their family. He wasn't afraid that his family would implicate him, but he was afraid that he would implicate his family. The pain of losing a loved one was an exceptionally painful torment, whether it was for himself or his family. Therefore, he didn't dare, he really didn't dare. Ever since he came to this world, he had met a lot of beautiful women. Whether it was Guan Qinghan, Dugu Xiaoyi, Princess Raimu, or the Silver Blizzard City's Princess Han Yan Meng, any one of these women was a peerless beauty that was hard to find. Some were cold and aloof, some were cute and naive, some were graceful and elegant, and some were intelligent. It could be said that each of them excelled in their own way. In fact, Jun Moxie appreciated them very much. In fact, he had a very good impression of them. But he had always restrained himself, and hadn't crossed the line. He knew that Dugu Xiaoyi liked him to the bone, but Jun Moxie was still hesitant, and couldn't make a decision. It wasn't that he was hesitant, but he had been weighing the pros and cons. Although he had always had a special feeling for Guan Qinghan, Jun Moxie didn't reveal it. Because Jun Moxie didn't know whether he could bear the responsibility of a family. At least, he wasn't ready in his heart. But never had he imagined that under a freak combination of circumstances, he would inexplicably seize Guan Qinghan's chastity under a situation where he was completely unconscious. He had his first woman in this world. June Moxie didn't care about women who were in love, no matter how beautiful and alluring they were. Even if he played with them and enjoyed himself, he could turn around and forget about them afterwards. But when it came to Guan Qinghan, he was determined not to. In fact, when he opened his eyes and found that Guan Qinghan was beside him, and after he figured out the cause and effect, June Moxie felt an inexplicable sense of responsibility and tenderness in his heart. Responsibility. Responsibility towards a woman. June Moxie knew this feeling very well. Although it appeared inexplicably, June Moxie did not reject this feeling. He even felt exceptionally warm. Although he didn't know what Guan Qinghan was thinking, June Moxie had already decided that this woman was his woman from now on. She was the first woman recognized by the evil monarch. June Moxie gently stroked Guan Qinghan's soft long hair that was scattered on the pillow, and he felt a trace of peace in his heart. It was like in this world, he finally had a companion and a trace of inseparable concern. This feeling was really wonderful. Actually, having a bond and a tender feeling isn't as scary as I thought it would be. The corners of June Moxie's mouth curled into a smile. He gently bent down, and pressed his face against Guan Qinghan's forehead. He then said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, thank you." Then he stood up and walked out. Da Xiao's physical fitness was really amazing at this moment. The exhaustion from the previous extreme venting only took a moment to ease, and it had made him recover a lot. Even his strong mental strength had recovered. His divine sense had already noticed that there were 5 or 6 people outside, seemingly waiting for him to go out. June Moxie knew very well who it was, and what it was for. After all, on this day, the movement in the tent was not small, and it lasted for such a long time. It would be strange if the third uncle didn't take some measures. June Moxie smiled bitterly. He had already guessed what kind of storm he would encounter when he went out. After all, the third uncle June Wui had dissolved Guan Qinghan's marriage with the June family. This matter had not spread yet. The whole world only knew that Guan Qinghan was his sister-in-law. And his behavior this time was tantamount to eating his sister-in-law, but June Moxie didn't want to escape, nor would he escape. Eating was eating. What's the big deal? Since a man had done it, he was not afraid to admit it. Couldn't he bear a woman's happiness? How could he still be called a man? I can only face it. No matter how violent the storm is, I can bear it. Only I can bear it. As June Moxie walked out, Guan Qinghan's eyelids gently blinked and slowly opened. 2 lines of tears quietly fell from the corner of her eyes, but on her face, there was a faint smile of satisfaction. Is this the so-called feeling of home? Is this the feeling of having a husband? It turned out that this feeling was really, very good, very nostalgic. Although she really suffered a lot today and lost her face, she didn't have much regret in her heart. Moreover, she couldn't help but hesitate because of June Moxie's situation at that time. It could even be said that if she wanted to leave at that time, she could totally leave. Therefore, no matter what the reason was, it could be said that she was willing to do what she did today, especially just now, when June Moxie thought that she was still unconscious. That gentleness, that consideration, made her feel sweet, sincere sweetness. Because everything that June Moxie did, he thought that she was still unconscious. In other words, that was completely from the tender feelings in his heart. This man's tender feelings set off a huge wave in Guan Qinghan's heart. This was the feeling of being protected from head to toe. It was really warm, so warm that I want to cry. Guan Qinghan's tearful smile on her face was like a rose in the morning, wet with dew, blossoming into a beautiful smile. It was so moving, but when she thought of her current awkward identity, she suddenly felt sad. What should I do? This is really a sin. When June Moxie walked out, he was really in a cold sweat. This cold sweat wasn't because he ate Guan Qinghan today, but June Moxie could see that, although he was very uncomfortable, Guan Qinghan was afraid that it was even more uncomfortable than him. After all, he still had a strong physique and the effect of that damn drug. When he was unconscious because of the drug, that habitual action almost lasted for a whole day. How much did Guan Qinghan bear? Even he didn't know how violent he was at that time. After that, when he saw Guan Qinghan, she was almost dying. Fortunately, it didn't continue. Even if it continued for half an hour, perhaps Guan Qinghan would also die because of this. So dangerous. So dangerous. Fortunately, although Dugu Xiaoyi's drug was fierce, it was not too excessive. Also, fortunately, Guan Qinghan's cultivation wasn't weak. Since she had been practicing martial arts since she was a child, her physique had always been good, far surpassing that of ordinary women. Therefore, she was able to withstand this time's violence. Otherwise, it would be really bad. However, Jun Mo Xia didn't know that Dugu Xiaoyi's drug wasn't too excessive. In fact, it was simply too excessive. That girl was afraid that the rice was not cooked well, so she did not show any mercy, leaving nothing behind in the whole packet. If not for Jun Moxi's special physique, and the huge effect of the Hongjun Pagoda's spiritual energy, while nourishing his body, it also dissipated a considerable part of the drug's effect. He was afraid that he would still be in the expedition now. Even if he could withstand it, what about Guan Qinghan? Jun Mo Xia had a bitter smile on his face as he walked out of the tent. He had somewhat recovered, but his feet were still limp. In fact, it felt as if he was walking on cotton. In fact, he felt as if he was walking on clouds and mist. In fact, his legs had turned soft as he walked. Damn, this thing is really exhausting, and I thought it was pretty good just now. Jun Moxie didn't think that he had been exercising non-stop for more than 10 hours. This kind of high-intensity, high-frequency, and intense exercise, it was already a miracle that he could still stand up and walk. If you don't believe me, why don't you try doing push-ups for 10 hours without stopping? I guarantee that you won't be able to stand up. Jun Wui and the rest had a confused and depressed look on their faces as they watched Jun Moxie walk over with his legs swaying. They all had a strange expression on their faces, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The little girl, Dugu Xiaoyi, sat on the ground in a daze as she watched Jun Moxie walk over shakily. Suddenly, sorrow came from her heart, and she burst into tears. Her tears were filled with regret and sorrow. Jun Moxie was stunned. You drugged me and lit the fire, but you ran away by yourself, and now you're crying? What's there to feel wronged about? But he didn't know that in Dugu Xiaoyi's heart, she had completely gone for wool and come home shorn. She had lifted a rock and dropped it on her own feet. The thing that she was most afraid of was created by herself. There was no need to mention that complicated feeling in her heart. Her original intention was to cook the raw rice, and then monopolize it. Who knew that the rice was cooked smoothly, but she didn't eat it because it was too hot, and she took advantage of the person who didn't want to take advantage of it the most. Wouldn't she be depressed to death? Now that she saw Jun Moxie, she suddenly thought of Guan Qinghan who had taken advantage of inside. For a moment, the grievance, anger, and unwillingness in her heart surged up at the same time. She wanted to say something, but couldn't, so she simply cried out loud. Before Jun Moxie could walk forward, he saw Solitary Eagle suddenly give him a thumbs up. Then, Dongfang Wenqing and the other two uncles looked at him with a strange expression. It was very ruminating, and somewhat meaningful. Jun Wui didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at his nephew's big black eye sockets. He asked impatiently, "You're out. How do you feel? How about Qinghan? How is she?" To be honest, Third Master Jun wasn't really concerned about Jun Dashao. Although Dashao looked weak, but he had still come out safely. He was more concerned about his adopted daughter, Guan Qinghan. Third Master Jun had analyzed that Qinghan had willingly endured the pain in order to help Dashao get rid of the aphrodisiac poison. But, Qinghan's temperament had always been unyielding. So, If she suddenly took things too hard, and decided to commit suicide because she had lost her chastity, then, that would be really bad. I'm fine, but my legs are a little weak. Sister-in-law, Ching Han is still sleeping. She's also fine. Jun Moxie scratched his head, and replied in an extremely awkward manner. He had habitually called her sister-in-law, but he had just remembered that Guan Qing Han was already his woman. So, how could he still call her sister-in-law? That was a very strange feeling. The young Master Jun wasn't used to the fact that he hadn't been scolded. His third uncle's temperament should have been uncontrollable. He should have started cursing at him. In fact, it wasn't impossible for him to break his legs on the spot. However, Jun Mo was left scratching his head in confusion. Could it be that the third uncle was so angry that he became muddle-headed? After such a long time, even a man of steel's legs would have gone soft. Solitary Eagle rolled his eyes and said, "Kid, you can still walk out. Your body is really good. Good nephew. You're really good. 10 hours A whole 10 hours This waste strength, your third uncle, admire it from the bottom of my heart. It's really good." Dongfang Wendao grinned and patted Jun Moxie's shoulder. He smiled so widely that his eyes could not be seen. "You're indeed the son of the general in white. With this ability, in the future, your own children will be able to gather 10 tables of mahjong. The Jun family is really going to prosper. I have high hopes for you." Jun Moxie's body was weak, and he almost fell to the ground from the slap. When he heard this, he couldn't help but be speechless. What kind of words are these? These words are spoken by an uncle? What does today's matter have to do with the general in white? Sure enough, Dongfang Wenqing flew into a rage and shouted, "Third brother, when we go back, immediately go to the disciplinary hall to receive the family law. You're an uncle, how can you say such words? Do you have any shame? You're a bastard. Brother Mo Xie." Dugu Xiaoyi burst into tears as she rushed over and hugged him tightly. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I shouldn't have left." Dugu Xiaoyi was extremely sad. The rice that I cooked was eaten by someone else. However, Dugu Xiaoyi didn't know that Guan Qing Han, who was older and had a stronger Xian Qi cultivation, was barely able to withstand the dosage of the drug. But, she wouldn't have been able to withstand it if she had been in her place. And, that would have led to a real tragedy, and, it would have been a great tragedy. The world would have changed. Just think about it, if old man Dugu were to find out that his precious granddaughter had died on the bed. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Jun Mo Xie didn't have enough physical strength at this time. He didn't have enough time to dodge, and a young girl's body crashed into his bosom. He looked at Dugu Xiaoyi crying so hard that she couldn't even breathe. His heart couldn't help but soften. "Alas, I already know the cause and effect of this matter. I know that you didn't mean it. Let's leave it at that." Jun Wui's lips squirmed for a long time. But, he felt that there was nothing to say in the end. So, he flicked his sleeves. "It's good that you're all right. I'll write a letter to your grandfather about this matter. But, I'll let your grandfather decide how to deal with this matter." He then turned around and walked away. But, he had only taken a few steps when he suddenly turned around again. Then, he clenched his teeth and said, "You little bastard, behave yourself for the next few days. I'll break your legs if you think about that nonsense again. Do you hear me?" The third Master Jun had called himself I, and his mouth was full of profanities. It could be seen how angry he was. They couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. Although this process was a little unimaginable, it reduced a lot of variables in the future. Damn it. At most, I will do whatever I want. Who the hell dares to gossip about me? I can do whatever I want. Who can stop me? The opinions of others, the opinions of the secular world, in my eyes, are nothing but a fart. It's over once it stinks. Therefore, Junmo Xia was gloomy, but he was also secretly pleased. Thinking of this, he wasn't so angry anymore. Besides, Dugu Xiaoyi only wanted to protect him. She didn't want him to be taken away. Although she was young and ignorant, and she did something wrong out of goodwill, but, as long as nothing happened, it didn't matter. Jun Moxie admitted that he couldn't scold or hit a girl who was deeply in love with him. But, he couldn't let her go just like that. Ignorance wasn't a sin. But if it caused serious consequences because of ignorance, then it would be a sin. If he didn't teach her a lesson today, what would happen if this little girl made trouble again in the future? After all, the two of them almost went to hell together after today's incident, not angry? Think about it. If it were you, wouldn't you be angry? Jun Moxie thought for a long time and said slowly. But sob. I was wrong. Dugu Xiaoyi sobbed and wiped her tears. She cried out, I should have eaten it myself, sob. I'm very unhappy about what happened this time. Jun Moxie snorted. Lenglang said, I don't want something like this to happen again. Yes. I won't dare. I really won't dare. I will change. Dugu Xiaoyi nodded quickly. She was relieved, but there was also a trace of pain in her heart. After this incident, the little girl seemed to have grown up a lot. Well, I will go back and learn from my mother. I will ask her. I'm really sorry about what happened this time. The little girl rubbed her clothes anxiously. Jun Moxie staggered and almost fell to the ground. He took a deep breath and almost suffocated. This kind of thing, you want to learn from your mother? You're not angry anymore. Then you've been cooked by Sister Guan. Do you still want me? Dugu Xiaoyi opened her big round eyes and asked persistently. Let's talk about this later. Jun Moxie's forehead was sweating. I don't care. You're cooked by me. Dugu Xiaoyi's mouth flattened. But Sister Guan ate me and took advantage of me, sob. It's all my mother's fault. She didn't tell me clearly. I really don't understand. Cooking a meal is like that. Junmo Xia was sweating profusely. He didn't even have the mood to be angry anymore. He only wanted to run away as fast as he could. The sex education of this era was really too unworthy of praise. After a lot of persuasion, the weeping Dugu Xiaoyi was finally sent back. Jun Moxie was physically and mentally exhausted. He operated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune and staggered back to the tent. This is a farce. After a moment of silence, a low voice came from the tree that the 5 experts had been leaning against. The voice was very soft, very cold, but also very gentle. It contained the aloofness of an icy peak, but also the grace of a disdainful person. Just by listening to this voice, one could tell that the person who had spoken was certainly a person who stood at the pinnacle of the world. Yes, but the only person who has benefited from this farce is that June brat. Another clear and melodious voice said. It was unknown when 2 people had been hiding in that tree. But the strangest thing was that the 5 experts had been under the tree a moment ago. But, they hadn't noticed them at all. It was clear that the cultivation of these 2 people was very frightening. Benefiting from this, that may not be the case. However, from the information we've gathered, it's absolutely impossible for Guan Qinghan to walk together with this bastard. But now, they're sleeping together. This is a variable that will make the Jun family very embarrassed. Let's see how the Jun family deals with this matter. The first voice said in a leisurely manner. But, no matter how the Jun family deals with this matter, the impact of this matter will not be small. The clear and melodious voice seemed to be taking pleasure in the misfortune of the Jun family. Then, she said, Elder sister, since you intend to accept this brat as your disciple, why didn't you take action? You could have just captured him and brought him back. Accept him as my disciple. He's dreaming. I only want to torture him. The first voice seemed to be gnashing her teeth. This hateful bastard, if not for. I would have torn him into 1,000 pieces with my own hands. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.